Breaking right now, America nearing a dangerous tipping point, opening its arms to socialist newcomer Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who now claims a society that allows billionaires to exist is immoral. This as the socialist dictatorship just 3 hours south of us, south of Miami, prepares for a massive uprising against the Chavez-Maduro's socialist regime that has left its people starving. Venezuela's regime has less than 24 hours until the people flood the streets to demand a resignation from Nicolas Maduro. Vice President Mike Pence showing his support for the country. Today, we have the very latest. And at this time tomorrow, we will bring you a Trish Regan Primetime exclusive, an interview with the Vice President of the United States, Mike Pence. Trish Regan Primetime begins right now. Breaking tonight, we are less than 24 hours from a potential total collapse of the socialist dictatorship in Venezuela, as this fragile country teeters right now on the edge, and as millions of people plan to take their massive uprising to the streets in just hours from now. Venezuela serves as a new warning for the United States of America, because tonight, our country, increasingly and unwittingly, is opening its arms to a form of government that never ends well. You see the pictures that have just come to us from Caracas in Venezuela. You think about Cuba, the Soviet Union. I'll tell you, they all have one thing in common, and that one thing is socialism. Yet the new darling of the left, self-declared socialist Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez from Queens, New York, out tonight saying that no society should allow billionaires to exist alongside poverty. And while she's right that life isn't fair, I'll tell you, the answer is not to stop someone from being a billionaire. The answer is to empower every single person in this country to reach his or her utmost potential. Watch her here.
A system that allows billionaires to exist when there are parts of Alabama where people are still getting ringworm because they don't have access to public health is wrong. It not only doesn't make economic sense, but it doesn't make moral sense.
You know, it may not feel morally correct, but I'll tell you, nothing's perfect, right? Government can be good. Government can provide safety nets. Government should help people to help themselves. But government, in the America we all love, should never put a cap on anyone's dreams or anyone's ambitions. And that is exactly what Alexandria, what Bernie Sanders, what Bill de Blasio and the rest of them want to do. And I tell you, it's dangerous. You have only to look 3 hours south of Miami to figure that one out. In Alexandria's utopian dream world, everyone gets a free ride, right? That's what she wants. Listen.
Once you get to like the tippy tops, on your $10 millionth dollar, sometimes you see tax rates as high as 60 or 70%. Medicare for All would save the American people a very large amount of money. I campaigned on hard commitments of Medicare for All, tuition-free public college, ensuring a Green New Deal. We look at these figures and we say, oh, unemployment is low, everything is fine, right? Well, unemployment is low because everyone has 2 jobs. Capitalism has not always existed in the world, and it will not always exist in the world.
Yeah, if she gets her way, right? But you see, this is exactly what Hugo Chavez promised. You know, I was just starting out my career. I was working as an analyst on the emerging debt market desk in the fixed income division of Goldman Sachs when Hugo Chavez was elected. Venezuela was back then, it was the summer of 1999, a pretty prosperous country. It had a good run. You know, but there were people, much like there are people in America today, that wanted to redistribute everything. They wanted to take from him to pay off her and vice versa. And this is what Chavez promised. He promised to close this gap between the rich and the poor. Sounded good, right? And then Nicolas Maduro came along and he promised the exact same thing. But you know what? I'll tell you, promises are just that. They are just promises. And in the case of these two-bit socialist dictators, they are totally, utterly worthless. I highlight this because, you know what? It's critical we understand the path that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is on. She clearly doesn't understand the path. She doesn't. So as Americans, we must understand the dangers that are out there, dangers that are very real, and we must guard against them. Here with me now as we watch the chaos unfold in the streets of Caracas, Venezuela tonight, economist Ben Stein. Ben, it is good to see you.
It's good to see you.
Where are we going wrong right now? I understand we have a problem, and I talk about it a lot. I mean, it's an hourglass economy, and the middle class is getting squeezed, and it's not fair, and it's not right. And I understand, you know, it's awful to see such extreme wealth and such extreme poverty. We do need some solution. But I'll tell you, I don't think socialism is the way. What is the path forward? Why, however, I should also say, is she seeing this success?
Well, she's seeing success because there are a lot of people just as ignorant as she is out there. She is a dynamic, lively character, and she seems to be giving you a message of hope, but she's giving a message of fraud. These messages about justice and equality always turn out to be messages which lead to dictatorships and messages that lead to the few oppressing the many. There's nothing wrong with a society that allows billionaires to exist, as long as the billionaires don't have the power to lock you up in prison or put you before a firing squad. Socialist countries are evil because they allow the government to, on the slightest pretext, take people, put them in prison for life, exile them, shoot them, and we don't want that. We want a society where people are free to do what they want. We do not want to have extremely poor people, and we don't have that many extremely poor people in this country. We have any is too many. But in this country, people are incomparably better off than they are in any socialist country. There's no comparison. Capitalism is the most successful route towards prosperity there has ever been. Free market capitalism outdoes socialism 1,000,000 to 1 in every regard, and in every regard, especially in lifting the poor out of poverty.
And Venezuela's learning that. I mean, they've tried, right? They tried, and Hugo Chavez had all kinds of promises, just like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Maduro had the same kind of promises. In fact, and we're going to show this a little bit later, the former vice president, Delcy Rodriguez, I say former because we no longer recognize her regime there with Maduro, she'll sit there and tell you with a straight face that Venezuela is the model of the world, despite the fact that 90% of the people live in poverty. Venezuela has figured it out. I just hope, Ben, we don't go through the same kind of incarnations and challenges that they have had to deal with.
Well, it depends on education. I mean, we have a society in which there are an awful lot of people who have no idea that Stalin, Hitler, Mao Zedong all came to power promising the same kinds of things that Ms. Ocasio-Cortez is promising, and it led to mass murder, led to dictatorship, it led to genocide. These problems are old promises, and they invariably lead to bad things. The promise of just saying to people, do what you can within the law to make your life better and your family's life better, that system works extremely well. Capitalism is a system that allows people to make something of themselves instead of oppressing other people. It's an incredibly good system. Making money is one of the most harmless things there is to do in the whole world, and that's what our society is about. It's not about ordering people around, putting them in concentration camps. What do you do if a person is a richer person and a poorer person? What do? You take him away? Do you shoot him? Well, that's what the communists tried. It didn't work out very well for them. And in the end of the day, we wound up in Russia with one of the most unequal societies there's ever been in the world. In Vietnam, which promised all these things, we wind up with one of the most corrupt countries in the world. In Venezuela, I don't know how corrupt it is, but people say it's one of the most corrupt countries in the world.
Pretty corrupt.
We don't wind up with the promises that people made.
Yeah. Listen, I think it's important to highlight this right now because I'm troubled by the rise in this socialist mentality. It never ends well. It really doesn't. And we're seeing that play out in Venezuela tonight. Ben Stein, thank you. All right, everyone, the partial government shutdown now extending into its 32nd day. No end in sight here. Democrats rejecting a compromise from President Trump that would extend protections for the so-called Dreamers in exchange for additional border security measures and $5.7 billion in border wall funding. A vote in the Senate on a bill resembling that proposal is now set for Thursday, though nothing's assured, as it will need 60 votes to pass. Joining me right now, a Dreamer who supports President Trump, Hilario Anez, a Mexican native who was brought to this country by his mom when he was just 1 year old. It's good to have you here. So you,
thank you for having me,
sir, are one of the people that would benefit from immigration reform. You would benefit from Chuck and Nancy saying, let's work this out, let's negotiate with the president, let's get a wall, and let's get some kind of protection in place for people like you?
Absolutely. First of all, I just want to thank the president for taking the first step forward and inviting, Speaker Pelosi to come to the table and negotiate. And I think right now there's a perfect opportunity for both parties to get a win-win situation.
Hilario, a lot of people would say, how could you support this president? We hear all the rhetoric and the left points fingers and they call him a racist and a sexist and a this and a that and you name it, right? And they keep going back to what he said about Mexican immigrants that come here. And yet here you are, someone who came here when you were 1 year old, doesn't have citizenship, right? Because you can't. I guess technically, can I say you're illegal?
That's fair. Undocumented.
Oh, you okay? So you're here illegally, and you run that risk, and yet you support the president. How come?
Well, look, I came here with no fault of my own. Look, I'm not asking for amnesty. If anything, all I'm asking for Congress is tell me where the line's at. If that's at the very end, I'm willing to go at the very end. I'm willing to die for this country. I'm willing, at the end of the day, to have the American flag over my dead body. That's how much I love this country. And I know that the president is a father first, and he understands what the Dreamer community is. And that's why he stands behind the Dreamer community, and I support him all the way through.
Do you feel like the Democrats have left you out in the cold on this one, Hilario?
Look, I think in the last 2 years, when it comes to immigration, it hasn't been the best for the president, but it's not his fault. At the end of the day, it's Stephen Miller has been a complete embarrassment and a joke to the president. And so I think the Democrats have a right to kind of not trust the president, but it's not the president's fault. It's Stephen Miller's fault.
In Stephen's defense, I actually think he's a pretty smart guy who's come up with some very interesting things. I mean,
but
some of it hasn't been received so well.
Embarrassment.
But but wait a second. The president has something on the table now, though. He's trying to get the wall and a 3-year extension for Dreamers like yourself. I mean, he'd like to do more. I think he would do more. I think you might even find yourself with a path to citizenship if Nancy and Chuck would sit down at the table. So where's the blame in your view?
Well, last year the president could have had $25 billion and also an opportunity for DACA recipients to have a permanent citizenship, but Stephen Miller blew it away. And again, DACA is still in the courts. The Supreme Court has decided they're not going to rule it, and it's another failure to the president. And I want the president to succeed as much as the American people do, but Stephen Miller has completely failed this president.
You're calling out Stephen Miller tonight. We'll make sure he gets the message. But anyway, Hilario, thank you very much.
Sounds good
to have you here.
All right.
Coming up, everyone, we are keeping a very close eye on Venezuela. In just hours from now, protesters who are fed up with Nicolas Maduro's brutal socialist dictatorship, they're going to be taken to the streets of that country. They are demanding change. They are demanding his resignation. Tomorrow, I sit down exclusively with the Vice President of the United States, Mike Pence, for an interview. I'm going to be asking him all about Venezuela and what our administration will do if Nicolas Maduro remains in power and what we will do in the event he's gone. Does it mean an opportunity for democracy and freedom and capitalism in Venezuela? And a little later this hour, I'm talking to conservative author Jerome Corsi at Target and Robert Mueller's Russia probe. He says he has the proof that the NSA has been surveilling him for years. His exclusive interview, straight ahead.
country.
New tonight, the socialist dictatorship in Venezuela is potentially less than 24 hours from ceasing to exist. And in a desperate last-minute scramble, is blaming the people's discontent not on their own economic failures, not on their own socialist policies, not on their own corruption, but on the United States and our vice president. Former vice president, I should say, because we no longer recognize her, of that socialist country, Delcy Rodriguez, going so far as to actually suggest that it is our vice president, Mike Pence, that is inciting violence in her country after he issued this message. Watch.
Nicolas Maduro is a dictator with no legitimate claim to power. He's never won the presidency in a free and fair election, and he's maintained his grip of power by imprisoning anyone who dares to oppose him. The United States supports the courageous decision by Juan Guaido, the President of your National Assembly, to assert that body's constitutional powers, declare Maduro a usurper, and call for the establishment of a transitional government.
So somehow that's the equivalent of inciting violence? Keep in mind, Mr. Maduro and Ms. Delcy Rodriguez are trying to create their own fictitious realities. Case in point, the former vice president tried to tell me with a straight face that Venezuela, a country that has left its people to starve effectively, is a model for the rest of the world. Watch.
Venezuela, it's a model of justice, of protection.
Unfortunately, a model of poverty. I mean, I don't know how you can dispute that. I've seen all of the video, and I have been to Venezuela, and I so appreciate the people. They are truly wonderful. But I'm saddened because there is a reality on the ground there that I think is incredibly challenging economically for you. This is a country that was once, per capita, income-wise, the best in Latin America, and now you have 90% of the people living in poverty. I can't see how you're going to hold it up on a pedestal and say this is a system anyone should admire.
I repeat and invite you not to repeat fake news.
Fake news. When it is her government, Nicolas Maduro, Delcy Rodriguez, holding 5 innocent Americans hostage. She can't keep the lights on in her country. She can't pay the bills in her country. You've got inflation that's rampant, expected to be more than 10 million% in the coming year. That is the reality in Venezuela. And it is a reality we cannot and should not ever allow here. CC. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Bernie Sanders, Bill de Blasio. Joining me right now is former Trump and Bush State Department official Christian Whiten, as well as exiled Venezuelan Mayor David Smolansky, a prominent member of the opposition itself. Good to have you both here. David, I'm going to start with you. Are you concerned about the safety and the well-being of people in the opposition right now? You're in exile, you've been able to get out, you're doing what you can from afar, but for those on the ground, what kind of danger are they in tonight?
Well, thank you very much for having me. Today, the regime threatened again the opposition, specifically Voluntad Popular in Spanish, people's will. That we are that we are creating violence, and the only ones that are creating violence in Venezuela is the regime. In these 20 years, more than 300,000 people have been killed because of crime. More than 400 people are are detained because of political reasons. There are political prisoners like Leopoldo Lopez, who is the Secretary General of Voluntad.
I just want to remind the viewers that his wife Lillian was on the program just last night and also on Friday night, which I would point out takes a lot of bravery because she's at risk, a mother of 3, for speaking out. Anybody who speaks out and is living in that country is at risk. Christian, what is the U.S. doing? How are we helping? I know that the Vice President is expressing his support, but is that enough? What do you anticipate happening in the next couple days?
Yeah, I think that support is very important. Speaking with clarity, this is a night and day difference from the Obama administration. Well, you'll recall that President Obama himself gave Chavez the brother handshake in a very all smiley meeting they had, and where Obama established relations with the key Chavez ally, the Castros in Cuba, and sent his most important White House foreign policy aide to Castro's funeral. We've changed 180 degrees from that, speaking clearly, and Pence really has done a remarkable job focusing on this, keeping attention on this, and now siding unequivocally with the people of Venezuela against this socialist, repressive, tyrannical government that hopefully is on the way out.
Hey, Christian, why is this so important? I mean, you get the Russians down there, you get the Iranians. Delcy Rodriguez told me herself, they're doing business with all of them. The Russians, the Iranians, the Chinese. I would think, given the proximity to the U.S., we would actually, for our own selfish reasons, would want to have a better relationship with the Venezuelans than, say, the Iranians do, right?
Yes, absolutely, for the reasons you cited and also for economic ones. There's been a remarkable turnaround in South America. It hasn't quite made it to the Bronx here in America or to Central America, but the right really has risen in South America. We saw it in Argentina first, then more recently with Bolsonaro elected in Brazil, proper right-wing control there. And finally, Venezuela, these countries which were either in the case of Argentina, first world countries or close to it, that were just devastated by socialism, finally turning the page. Hopefully, it will be fantastic for the United States. This is our backyard. These are our close neighbors. And as an oil exporter, Venezuela really can bounce back.
It would be great for Venezuela. David, very quickly, I know that you and your family have basically spent generations running from socialism, from the former Soviet Union, Cuba, Venezuela. What is your hope right now for your country?
I have a lot of hope at this moment. Tomorrow we're going to see a historical protest, not only in Venezuela, where I'm sure hundreds of thousands of people are going to the streets, but also we're going to have a worldwide protest in more than 100 cities. And I think we're very close to restore democracy in Venezuela. We're really close to restore freedom in Venezuela. We're really close to stop this humanitarian crisis, this hyperinflation, these crime rates, and all the work that the brave people are doing in Venezuela and the ones that are in exile is something that the next generations are going to appreciate. So the next hours are very important for Venezuela, and it's for us. I'm sorry to take a bit longer. For us, it's very important that tomorrow, because there's no media in Venezuela, there's a lot of censorship in Venezuela, it's very important that you could share all the images and all the videos that the protests will have in Venezuela.
Well, you can count on us. We're going to continue to stay on this story. David, thank you very much. Christian, appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, coming up, everyone, a warning to all the far-left Democrats who are trying to undermine our Constitution, our country, and our very existence. I'm looking at you, Beto O'Rourke. I'm looking at you, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and I'm also looking at you, Bill de Blasio. I am setting the record straight on how your far-left policies will turn our country into a banana republic if we're not all careful. That's next. The Constitution of the United States, the very essence of who we are as a nation. It's under attack tonight. An attack launched by the left, desperate for a political opportunity to reshape the world as they want the world to be. Not how it is, but as they want it to be, because, they're not operating here on planet Earth. They have this idea of a utopian universe, and they think they can somehow get us there. Beto O'Rourke, a rising star of the left right now, suggesting our Constitution might need to be reworked for the new era in which we live. So I have a little warning for Beto, and I cite what I consider to be a pretty good case study in political science, Venezuela. It's the reason we keep doing it on the show. Now, tonight, on the eve of the people's plan to take back their country, I just want to remind you that Venezuela once had a politician who insisted on tearing up his country's constitution himself. And his name was Hugo Chavez. I mentioned this earlier. I was just starting my career. at the time. I was working as an analyst in the fixed income division at Goldman Sachs here in New York on the emerging debt markets desk. And we traded Venezuelan sovereign debt and PDVSA debt back in the days when the country actually paid its bills. Chavez came to power, and the first thing he did was tear up the Constitution. He consolidated power. He got rid of the different branches of government, and he very quickly began to quote, unquote, reform the country. He stole land from the people, saying it wasn't properly utilized. Kind of reminds me of what New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio is saying these days. He wants to take distressed buildings away from landowners. But guess what? Well, some of Chavez's newfound government land did actually go to the poor. Most of it went to friends and family and colleagues, all his cronies. You see, you know what? You can legislate a utopian existence all you want, but you cannot get rid of basic human instincts, some of which, aren't that good. In a utopian world, you don't have any greed. It doesn't exist. But in the real world, you see, it does. So the key, as our founding fathers so brilliantly articulated, the key is to protect us, in a way, from ourselves. We have a great republic. It may not always be perfect. It may not always be fair, but we have those checks and balances for a reason. We have the best system in the world. Let's keep it that way. Here with me to react to all of this, presidential historian Doug Weed. Doug, it's amazing, right? You've got people that are actually talking very seriously about, well, maybe we need to redo this Constitution because, our founding fathers didn't, I get it, our founding fathers didn't anticipate that we'd have a television that we'd be talking to, you through a lens with. They didn't anticipate a lot of things, but you know what? They really understood the heart, I think, of what our existence would be well into the future. And they understood that you need to guard against yourself sometimes with all those checks and balances. Is it not a dangerous thing to tear up the U.S. Constitution?
It's dangerous. Beto O'Rourke said it's the question of the moment. Those were his words.
It's not a question. Shouldn't ever be a question, but go on, sir.
And the question of the moment, he says, is does it work? I think the question of the moment is in 1787 when Benjamin Franklin came out of Constitution Hall and someone said, Dr. Franklin, did you get us monarchy or a republic? And Benjamin Franklin said, a republic, sir, if you can keep it. That was the question he asked in 1787, and it may be the question we're going to have to ask ourselves in 2020. Can we keep it or are we going to lose it?
Well, if we lose it, what's at stake?
Well, the socialism, I think, that would come upon us today would not be quite the socialism of Denmark or the socialism of Venezuela. I suspect it would be a crony socialism, just like there's crony capitalism. It would be socialism for you and me and most of us, but it would be empowerment and advantage for a tiny few. I think Beto O'Rourke...
That is, by the way, the socialism of Venezuela and for Cuba. If you're in power,
that's
if you're friends with Maduro, right, you're living quite well. And maybe you're involved in some bad things, as we have learned, including the drug trade, but you're doing okay, right? You're protected, and you're part of the protected class. So I'd include Venezuela in that group. And Denmark, dare I go into Denmark, because they'll jump all over me. Denmark gets very sensitive about these things. Denmark is not quite the socialist country that Venezuela is. I would never compare it quite to Venezuela. They do have a lot of capitalist procedures in place, too. But even there, they have challenges as well. Again, there's this thing called human instinct. And look, I don't like it, but it's there, right? And greed actually is part of our DNA. And when you try and say, I'm creating a utopian universe and we're not going to allow that feeling, that basic instinct that humans have, Doug, I don't think you can do it. I think you wind up with other kinds of problems, as we've seen over and over and over again.
Yeah, the best testimony for socialism are the people who live under socialism. And in the Soviet Union, there was a very famous joke that went everywhere, and it's the commissary speaking to the students, and he says, "Comrades, there's good news and bad news. The good news is someday even the great United States of America will become a socialist country. The bad news is when that happens, there won't be any place left on earth for us to buy grain." So even the socialists know it doesn't work.
Yeah, and I sure hope we don't go that direction. Anyway, Doug, it's good to see you. Thank you so much.
Good to see you,
All right,
Trish.
coming up, everyone, it's a story we've been following closely here on Trish Regan Primetime. Conservative author Jerome Corsi, who is a target in Robert Mueller's Russia probe, says he has proof that the government has been surveilling him even before the probe began, he says. And that's not all. Wait until you hear what else Dr. Corsi claims the government is doing. We have all the details straight ahead. New tonight, the Mueller probe targeting Jerome Corsi, upping the ante here. Jerome Corsi, he is talking to Trish Regan Primetime, that'd be me, about it all first in an exclusive interview right here for you tonight. Dr. Corsi now claims special counsel Robert Mueller worked in concert with Jeff Bezos and the Washington Post to defame him with false statements, he says, and one of Dr. Corsi's standing business agreements. That means Dr. Corsi is now adding to his lawsuit. He is suing the Washington Post, he is suing Jeff Bezos, and he is suing one of the reporters there, raising the bill on his defendants to the tune of $1.5 billion. Don't forget, Jerome Corsi is also suing Robert Mueller and the rest of the feds for $350 million. Joining me right now here on set in an exclusive interview, conservative author Jerome Corsi. Dr. Corsi, welcome back. Good to have you.
Thank you, Trish.
You know, I never like to see reporters getting sued because I believe in the freedom of the press. But in the particular case of Jeff Bezos, the Washington Post, your concern is that there's something amiss. Tell us what it is.
Well, starting last week, the reporter in question called me and said he had inside information from the Mueller team, prosecutors, namely that I was being paid hush money by Alex Jones's father in order to shut me up about something or other, and that in fact I had turned on Alex Jones and was going to now reveal information, and I was working with the prosecutors. It was all preposterous. First of all, I've been being paid severance by Dr. Jones, and we had worked that out. There's an agreement. I have a copy of the agreement. I can publish it tomorrow after our interview.
And by the way, Dr. Jones would be Alex Jones' father,
Alex
and
Jones'
Dr.
father.
Jones was running the business.
Dr. Jones runs Alex's business.
Okay, so you used to work there, you left, you were getting severance payments.
Yes.
The Washington Post found out about this and said, hey, and somehow there's a leap between severance payments
And hush money.
Hush money for what?
Well, I don't know, because I've been about the most vocal there is out there. I've said everything. I've even written a book, The Silent No More, in which I've made it very, very clear exactly what's happened with the special prosecutor. And I've been open, given many interviews. So the idea that I'm being paid hush money is preposterous.
So the thinking somehow, and you know, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm just trying to piece all this together. Does Mueller's team believe, again, you know something about how the DNC was hacked into, those emails were taken and then given to Assange? They think that somehow you can connect all those dots and that Alex Jones doesn't want you to, hence the whole hush money idea?
Yes, in fact, one of the things the Washington Post was suggesting was that the NRA is being funded by Russia, and the NRA was funding Alex Jones, and the NRA is tied to the Republican National Committee and Donald Trump, so I was being paid by Russia. And I was supposed to be giving hush money in order not to reveal this. It's all preposterous. I mean, but this was coming from the special prosecutor, and today it comes out that the special prosecutor is looking into the NRA's relationship to Donald Trump. So I'm confident this was again a leak from the special prosecutor aimed to defame me and to end my relationship with Dr. Jones, which I had hoped, which is now ended. So all my income has been cut off. Mueller's succeeded. But I'd hoped that I could work with Dr. Jones to foster a new relationship, a continuing relationship. I mean, I brought a $20 million investment offer to Alex Jones early on, and he rejected it.
But, Alex Jones aside, you also say that you do believe that they have been surveilling you, the feds, for some time,
Absolutely.
even before this whole probe started?
Yes.
What leads you to that, though?
Well, I show up in Dennis Montgomery, one of the whistleblowers' databases. My income tax surveillance started right after I wrote Unfit for Command with John O'Neill against the football kid's John Kerry. Now the IRS has probably examined all my income tax forms back 20 years. It's constant. I mean, the special prosecutors, when they were interrogating me, seemed to know details about my past that could only have come from surveillance, I'm concluding.
Gosh.
I mean, I'm the one who revealed that Donald Trump was under surveillance and still was through FISA surveillance through October 2017 when he was president. I think I've been under FISA court supervision and surveillance as well.
There are no words. Dr. Corsi will continue to stay on night. Please come back. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Don't forget to check out Dr. Corsi's book, Silent No More, coming up, The Covington Catholic High School Story.
As someone in witness protection, I can't tell you anything